Hello, hello. Thank you for watching our podcast. I am Katrie. Before I continue, this is my old sign name. This is my current sign name. Hello, I'm Courage. Today, we are here to talk about issues on our podcast entitled, We Can't Tackle It, which is a podcast segment created with the D-Next Accessible Media Lab. That will focus on how IBPOC deaf people are being impacted by discrimination and supremacist colonial powers in the language we use, that being ASL. Now, I want to express deep thanks to two beautiful people who have joined us today, which is wonderful. They are friends from the deaf community in the area. Let's get started. Firstly, I want to introduce you to Sarah. Here is her sign name. Sarah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your story?
Hello. Thank you for having me here. I feel very honored. My name is Sarah, and I grew up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I went to a day school called Metro Toronto School for the Deaf. So I grew up in the city along with my friends. I was mainstreamed. I currently work as a deaf interpreter where I am in different communities, in a variety of settings such as medical. My goal is really to advocate and get involved and to encourage other people to get involved in my community.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing. Now, we also have Nancy joining us.
Hello. My sign name is this. My name is Nancy. I really want to thank both Gatry and Courage for welcoming me to be involved today. I feel deeply honored. My comments are not on behalf of the deaf community. They're my own. I grew up in Brampton, Ontario, Canada, attending the nearby deaf school ECD, Ernest C. Drury School for the Deaf in Milton. After graduating, I continued my education at Gallaudet University with a BA in ASL Studies, then my master's degree in deaf education with an emphasis in the bilingual approach. After graduation, I moved to Japan for a year where I taught and worked with the Japanese team on their bilingual education approach. I moved back and have been working as a teacher, teaching both interpreting and ASL. My teaching background has been rooted in human rights with deaf studies and ASL. Which brings us to our current climate and this discussion. Again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this.
Thank you, Nancy, for sharing your story. Are we ready? Absolutely. Take it away, Courage. Ask a question. Thank you, Sarah and Nancy, for sharing your stories from Toronto. Amazing. I do have one question to ask you both, but I'll direct this one to Nancy. In terms of unpacking colonialism, share your experience related to deconstructing systemically white experiences in Canada.
Wow. Well, I really think it requires a long answer, but I will try to summarize. In my family, my parents, mostly my father, instilled in me the importance of being supportive of everyone, which I didn't fully understand at the time. It wasn't until I arrived at Gallaudet and was witnessing racism, blatant racism, especially compared to Canada, where it was present but tends to be subtle. This was overt racism. I continued all the while with the belief that I was not racist. While teaching deaf studies in ASL, we consistently discussed autism, human rights, and deaf rights. Often there was a heavy focus on deaf rights, and now I have come to realize that. Deaf rights marginalizes the IBPOC community. Deaf people are part of the IBPOC community. This leads me to a parallel, all lives matter, which you can see reinforced in the Deaf Studies curriculum. Because there's no mention of Black Deaf studies, Black Deaf history, or their language, none of this was taught. Growing up, I was never taught anything about the Black community and their history, absolutely nothing. Realizing that really impacted me. The biggest impact came was when I learned about the term intersectionality. I started to learn more about intersectionality, having those conversations. I came to realize that there was so much I didn't know. The more I learned, the more there was to learn. What I also came to realize is what I believed, that I am not racist, isn't accurate. People are either white racist or anti-racist. Since that realization, I am working towards shifting to being an anti-racist by doing the work while looking critically at myself and not forgetting that all of us have been a part of the white supremacist, an elitist system that has controlled and oppressed others. With this perspective, we cannot continue to teach deaf studies and ASL only. It needs to be more broad so that all communities can be represented with the curriculum. But also in my conversations with other people, it must be done every day. Studying, learning, self-reflecting, and educating others when I see misinformation. To take the time to explain and discuss in order to support BLM and IBPOC peoples.
Wow, you gave me goosebumps. Thank you so much for being raw with us. I really appreciate it. And now I would like to present the same question as Sarah, if you could. Thank you.
Wow, that's a challenging question for sure, but a question everyone should be asking themselves. I grew up in an area with lots of diversity and multiculturalism. It was inclusive. I had lots of different friends. I grew up in the intercity Toronto area where I interacted with a lot of different people. I was fortunate in that my school curriculum did teach about slavery, and we did learn about Indigenous peoples. So I had these teachings and learnings along the way through reading and also through the things I was seeing, so I had some awareness of the issues. But I started to realize that the systems in place are racist. I would say that 4 to 5 years ago, I really started to realize and to recognize white privilege. And I started to see it more and more. What really impacted me was a trip to Cuba I took with a group of 5 of us women. While we were there, we contacted a church that had a hearing pastor who serves the deaf community. And I brought all the ladies there. Prior to all this happening, I did ask the church if there was a deaf club. And a number of other things, and the response was, no, there wasn't any club, to which I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, I brought the other ladies to the church to offer support to the Cuban deaf children, which was fine. But when I arrived, I happened to bump into a deaf person who led us to the deaf club. Why hadn't the hearing pastor done the same and introduced us? As I interacted with the group, I learned that they are a very ambitious group and that collectively they had established the club and had 3 interpreters working full-time. I asked them where the money comes from those services. Does the government help? To which I found out that no, all the deaf members pay monthly for the interpreters to stay at the clubhouse to interpret, make phone calls to solicit for donations, and the families use networking for fundraising. It gave me goosebumps, and it made me think about all the people back home who have sat and cried, we don't have any money, we can't do anything, and we can't move forward, and have become paralyzed by it. I'm done with that. It really hit me when I saw what they did in Cuba. It really made me question, where is our creativity? Other things that come to mind are related to interpreting. I myself am an interpreter. I see the politics. Black interpreters share their stories of how they feel oppressed by the system. I began reflecting about my role in that, about my own white privilege, and learning more. Realizing that no, this is not okay. There needs to be equality and equal space. When I'm in the room with a hearing person, I expect equal space, and yet people are sharing their story very raw. They aren't being heard. That's not equal space. Just wow. So I continue to read, educate myself, to follow and to listen and watch people's stories. I try to incorporate what I am learning and to make sure I continue to have open dialogue and discussions to continue to learn, read, and continue to focus on the anti-racist word. Similar to what Nancy has said, to work on changing the narrative of I am not racist. I know the difference between right and wrong. I am good. That's it. No. Silence is complicity, and that's something I have really come to recognize. If it means I could lose my life to make sure that someone else has equal human rights, I would. So that's my goal. Thank you.
I am sure the two of you have noticed my tears, but these are tears of joy. I am really touched. What you both have shared today is really raw, and I agree that work on anti-racism is really important. So thank you. Thank you. Now I will turn it over to Gaytree. Yes, this is very emotional for us. Okay, now I would like to ask both of you a question. How was it that you came to recognize and realize a specific incident that caused you to acknowledge our experiences as part of the IBPOC community and how we are confronting racism? Why did you choose to share that story with us? We will start with Sarah.
There are many different stories that have touched me. There have been many things I have seen that were not right or I questioned why it happened. Looking back, I can't really. It's very difficult to choose just one story. They all have me shattered, broke my heart, or often made me feel that's not right. Growing up, I knew about Rosa Parks, the Underground Railroad, and a number of other events. But the incident that really impacted me on a deeper level was the story of, I think his name starts with a Trayvon. I forget the last name. I don't remember all names. I am bad with names. But it happened in Florida. He was just a young man walking down the street with headphones on who was gunned down by a white man. It really was senseless. That's when BLM started. I became more aware and actively listened to all the stories to try to give them equal respect. And equal sorrow, and equal... There is no single story that is worse than another. They are all unnecessary.
Thank you, Sarah. Rosa Parks is one of my role models, who was a true leader, who I love and will never forget. And now I would like to ask Nancy the very same question.
I would say the same as Sarah. There are so many. But one experience that stands out to me happened recently, about 2 weeks ago. A friend and I were making our way to the beach. It was a quiet beach where there weren't any people around due to COVID. Anyway, as we were making our way, I looked over and saw a park called Ross Park. But it was interesting to me because someone had scratched out the last S on Ross and replaced it with an A and added an S to Parks. They changed it to Rosa Parks. So I excitedly pointed that out to my friend, only to find out they didn't understand the significance. They didn't know the history. If we know the history, then we can change the future. It's important to know the past and the history. We cannot just be passive and complacent. I see so many people saying, I am not racist, and I am not offending anyone. But that is not enough. What we have learned throughout our lives is instilled in us. We need to do the work to change it. In that example, I was aware of the history, and I took the opportunity to explain it to my unaware friend to create awareness, and that is my job. That's just one example of the many everyday things I am doing along with having conversations and interacting with others. Another realization I had was when looking through childhood photos. And I noticed that all my friends growing up were white, so I really thought about that. Only a very few were IBPOC, not many. It really made me think about, how do I know their joys and their experiences? By being with them and interacting. It is not appropriate to ask what is wrong or expect explanations, as that triggers microaggressions. I am responsible for that myself, as Sarah said, to read and observe. This work has completely shifted my lens and see now that my previous one was wrong. And still, there is so much more to learn. I take responsibility as a person who has set a goal to do anti-racist work every day, whatever that may look like. And I'm not sure exactly, but anything that will create change so that all people have equality, which is not our current reality, because white supremacist systems are still in power. We need to work towards building up IBPOC people and communities to balance the power. Only then will we see equal opportunity. Currently, the false dichotomy between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter needs to be addressed. We are responsible to ensure that Black Lives matter, and only then will we see true equity. Whatever it takes, we must continue doing the daily work.
Wow. Sarah and Nancy, you both are very brave to put that out there. And I know that can be very difficult because you are both white. Amazing. But we both have your backs. We really appreciate having you here and appreciate you being raw and putting yourself out there. Thank you so much. Courage, do you have another question you would like to ask? Yes, absolutely. I agree with Gaytree. I still have goosebumps. Keep going. Don't stop using your voice. The audience deserves to hear you. Being white, you both took a huge risk to put yourself out there and to share. Thank you. I really do mean it. I do have one other question for both of you. I would like to ask Sarah to answer this one first. What are your thoughts and perspectives on ASL literature using ASL Black versus white when discussing persons and objects? Please put the camera on Sarah.
This topic recently being discussed and was new to me. I didn't even realize. I am aware of the history of linguistics and of ASL signs. Signs for different colors, such as white, came from the frilled shirts that were worn long time ago, and the sign black was because of the dark black eyebrows. So that's how these signs were established. I was aware of the history and how and why the signs were established until the recent discussion about the signs ugly versus beautiful and the undertone and correlation between those, the signs for white and various other examples. That's when I became aware of it. I am disappointed because we have had opportunities over the years for ASL to evolve. And it hasn't happened yet. Why is that? Why is it that we haven't studied ASL through that lens to identify, recognize, and modify the language in a way that is respectful to the identity of others? It's like ASL signs were established. The language is locked and unchangeable, and that's it. It really hit me. It really hit me. So my point is that language and linguistic studies overall, and I am by no means an expert, but I do listen and I do learn. And what I do know is that languages are constantly changing and over time evolve. So why haven't we seen that with ASL? We have seen some changes, like with the sign for family or how we produce the sign culture. Those have changed. But why not the signs that are related to identity? When I first saw the new sign for Black persons, I immediately thought, I want to use that sign. It's a beautiful fit. But I now also realize while BLM is still ongoing, I can't use that sign. My hope is that one day ASL will become a more diverse and inclusive language, and that will represent the different communities and identities better. One example is the old sign transsexual. That sign has evolved to honor transsexual people. So why are we not honoring Black people by how we sign Black? That is a big missing part and only proves how the deaf community is powerfully influenced by colonialism. There is still inherent pride within the established imbalance of power, even within us. ASL should be used for everyone. We all use it. White people should not be telling others you can't use it. No, language is used by everyone with diverse backgrounds. So now when I think about the sign Black, can I have the sense of pride and say, yes, that sign is the perfect fit? No, I can't. When the indigenous people changed the sign, that was good, and they gave us permission to use it. But Black people are not giving us permission, which felt profound. But it happened for a reason, and given time, it may change. Now we need more deaf community involvement to recognize them, to listen to their voices, to understand them. They're a big part of the deaf community and users of the language of ASL too.
Yes, I agree. It is an opportunity. For sure, and having the deaf community involved in the discussions is important. Teamwork, listening, and having ongoing dialogue is important. Thank you, Sarah. Now I want to turn it over to Nancy to answer the same question.
When I think about this, all languages experience changes driven by people and communities. Reaching a consensus as a community in a short time frame is difficult, as there is usually a more natural evolution. The technology, geography, cultures of present day influence language. Regarding ASL specifically, are there enough dialogues occurring that are representative of the diverse communities? Or are they mostly had by white people, modifying my language choice as per this conversation? White community in isolation, as has historically happened with ASL and deaf studies. It must be a broader, more inclusive conversation. Only then will ASL evolve and reflect the entire community. In terms of a Black or white answer, I think there are several factors to consider, such as community, people, culture, language, people's various backgrounds, as well as people's varying perspectives and differing worldviews. Canada is diverse, but what does diverse really mean? Hearing people have their definition and deaf people have their definition. And from what I can see, we are divided. I have to admit, when I am in a diverse setting, I am anxious and worried about whether I would say the wrong thing or inadvertently offend someone. But what I have learned is that white colonialism, the idea that you have to be perfect, prim, and proper, and if you make even a minor mistake, you withdraw and embody white silence. You immediately revert to a passive place in fear of making another mistake. The consequence is the delayed evolution of language, not wanting to engage and playing it safe, which only perpetrates the racist behaviors, ideas, thoughts, and the abuse and racism continues. I really believe that we as white people need to be brave to go through the process of making mistakes. From mistakes comes learning. We make mistakes, develop awareness, recognition, then change. We will start to see positive steps and must continue this work every day towards ongoing improvement. Making mistakes is okay if we improve while doing so. It's a problem if we continue to make the same mistakes, are flippant about it, don't learn from them. That is continued racist behavior. Part of becoming anti-racist is realizing that we will make mistakes along the way whilst continuing to work, change, and learn. Mistakes will happen because we grew up with white colonialism, and it won't change overnight. It's a lifelong process. As for the different signs for Black, that is tied to social identity. I am not Black, so it is not appropriate for me to use the sign that is being used in that community. I go back to my earlier comment. As people learn, they realize how much they don't know. Education is fundamental. There is a significant gap in regard to Black deaf studies, Black deaf culture, and language. This is not something I had seen previously. Now I'm actively learning, and when I start to feel anxious about making a mistake, I pause and acknowledge that I will make mistakes, and it's okay, because I will learn from them.
Absolutely. I hear you both. Absolutely. Regarding racism, and as a white person, I want to encourage you and say that mistakes are okay. Mistakes are important. I have noticed that mistakes silence people, but that's not helpful. BLM is screaming and screaming loud because we want to be heard, and our message is always bitter. Raw, blunt, and I must admit scary. But it's because we have a passionate fire burning. It's not fair that we must constantly accommodate the white racist systems. When will we be accommodated? When is it our turn? So thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Sarah. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gaytree. She has another question for you both. Yes, I do. How does one get knowledge and access to power? How does one have more power and another has less? How is this determined? Please share your perspective. Sarah?
Nancy mentioned the lens we hold. Many white people have a cookie-cutter image mindset. If something doesn't fit that, then it isn't good enough. There must be certain behaviors, expectations that fall in line with everyone else, not freehand. Growth that recognizes differences, they must fit the mold. Anyone who almost fits that mold believes they hold power. They are like the others and feel as though they are perfection, which is often recognized. Others who make mistakes as they go, ask questions, and are accepting. Continue down that path to figuring it out. People who fit that perfect mold think doing something once is good enough. No, ongoing discussion is necessary. That is the power of white privilege. That question requires a lot of thought, using different examples of everyday life. Seen through different lenses as a deaf person, a woman, a single mother, and an interpreter. I admit that after self-reflection and learning about white privilege, identifying what I have, the sense of feeling safe, that is what I value. And see that others don't have that? No, I must share that feeling. It's not mine to keep all about myself. Collective thinking, community-based as a team. As I sit back and observe as a white person, I see spaces that do not have equity, and I see that there are common issues. And with teamwork, they can grow. I still don't understand why people must hoard all that control. There is no benefit. The best approach is to take control of yourself, take responsibility, action, and share, like an efficient machine. There is no benefit. The best approach is to take control of yourself, take responsibility, action, and share, like an efficient machine. White systemic establishments is like a well-oiled machine, where they are producing cookie cutters. As a deaf person, I don't entirely fit into it. But half of me still does. I want out of it. I don't think we need molds. We just need to be collaborative. I often discuss socialism, capitalism, and communism. Capitalism is oppressive, racist, private business driven by profits. Socialism can offer a balance, but it comes down to the leaderships, as does communism. Fidel Castro was a great, humble leader who believed in equity. Other communist leaders are not. Most leaders are white, or white thinking, with a long and embedded history. We should look to the indigenous communities who work together in unity and borrow their model by working collectively as a team. The system is failing. We are failing. White people are failing. Failing to keep everyone safe, to share, support, hold hands together.
Thank you, Sarah. I love how you use the analogy of cookie cutters. The only way both groups are going to make a difference is if people open their minds, reflect, and clear the fog on their lenses to see the rainbow awaiting them. That is a wonderful message you gave us. Nancy, I'll ask you the same question.
People have historically experienced oppression, whilst fighting and advocating for many, many years. White women learned of their tactics, took them, and applied them to their own agenda. They dismissed the Black originators and proceeded without them. When I learned of this, it had a significant impact on me. Looking back to the rallies and protests for deaf rights and sign language rights, the members of the IBPOC community shared that they felt they were being taken advantage of as a symbol of tokenism. I would reply to that by saying, no, we are deaf. We are the same. But this is how they felt. When someone says that this is their truth, we must believe them. From there, I began learning more. There is such power that is used to take from a marginalized community for your own benefit. White people have so much power because we look like the people in power. Rather than being in the forefront, we need to stand behind, support, and uplift the IBPOC community. That is how we will reach equality and power, which we do not have. And we will not have peace until we do. Yes, we do have power, but how do we use that power? How do we collectively support the IBPOC community to collaboratively move this forward? That is my understanding of power. As white people, we have a lot of power. We need to stop being passive and complacent and put in the sweat equity. That is a decision you need to make. To work together. I have made the decision to work with the IBPOC community.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, power and knowledge combined will help reach equality. Yes, thank you, Nancy and Sarah. Thank you. This question is for Sarah. How do you feel about Black Sign Language, ASL, culture, and linguistics?
How do I feel? I think it's beautiful. But why has it been missing? Why hasn't it been a part of our lives until now? Growing up, I have always had Black people in my life. Classmates, my parents' friends, and family friends. However, a lot was overlooked, realizing that their input and culture was not incorporated. It is almost as though we need to invite or offer the opportunities, but why and who holds that control? That is the challenge. There needs to be growth, a focus on research, and publish their findings more. Then later, when there is a feeling of safety, equity, then we can engage in the work together. However, for the time being, I understand the importance of recognizing the current divide without continuing to influence it. For far too long, there has been significant influence from white people, oppression, appropriation, colonization. It's time for growth, to give back for the future of Black, deaf children. It is vital. We need curriculum and other needs. They need to find their identities. There is very little for them in a world full of white people. There is too much interference. I understand that sometimes division is necessary to provide a safe space. When the time comes and people feel ready, when there is equitable space, we can sit down with their language and our language and understand each other. There won't be a perfect or right way to say something or to use the language. It is important that we all understand each other. That is communication, unity, and teamwork. If it doesn't work, and white people continue to oppress, we will lose time. This is the time now. We see that Gallaudet has established Black deaf studies. That's great. But the civil rights movement was 40 years ago. The African American History Museum, Black deaf people were forgotten. IBPOC were forgotten. Intersectionality and identity are important and need to be recognized. That is a challenge with labels. That is my struggle with labels. I understand they are necessary to show what is wrong with the system and to express pride in their identity. People need to identify themselves. No other person should be identifying a person or a group. That's not right. We need to encourage growth. We have been blocking the sun on the IBPOC people. Black people, how did they grow? That's selfish.
Yes, thank you. To be honest, I've never liked labels. They make me uncomfortable and are a trigger for me. I want to show my identity, who I am as Courage, a Black deaf woman, which encompasses my passion, advocacy, and beliefs. Thank you, Sarah. That was deep. I feel emotional right now, but I am listening. Nancy, same question to you.
There isn't just one answer. Black ASL has been part of that community for many years. Students were segregated based on race. That is the history, creating two language communities where the language evolved. And when they were integrated, it continued to experience change and evolution. It is important to know the history. What Black Studies has done is shed light on the origins of Black ASL. ASL users are people of all different backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures, values, and the area they are from will influence their language. It is important to be mindful of language appropriation. Be very careful that you are respectful of their language. I recall a time that I was having a conversation with a friend. They were Black and using Black ASL. During that conversation, I took a step back because they were using a large signing space. And this is not something that is typical with white ASL users. I commented on the use of their space, and they clarified that this is Black ASL. I also read research published by Carolyn McCaskill and Joseph Hill. Their book is Black ASL Treasure. I can't recall the exact name, but after watching videos, learned more about Black ASL. The more I become aware, the less likely I am to appropriate their language. When I had previously been drawn to a certain aspect of Black ASL and tried to incorporate it in my own language use, I was made aware that it wasn't appropriate because I wasn't Black. I liken this to the times when hearing signers would use specific features of ASL that are, in my perspective, deaf traits. I'm not comparing the experience of being deaf to being Black, but I'm trying to apply my experiences to gain a better understanding of language appropriation. And if I do not like seeing it with ASL, it helps me become aware and recognize it so this is not repeated. Language appropriation is too easy because of the power we hold. When a white person appropriates Black ASL, others think it is cool and it draws unwarranted white-centered attention, whilst the Black community has been using the very same language without respect, recognition, or attention. When the language is appropriated and the audience thinks it's cool and draws attention, this is when we need to respect people and not appropriate to incorporate as our own, when we already hold so much power. That's what I will say for now. I have more, but I think that is enough for now.
Language appropriation, yes. When I was a young girl, I was so excited to learn ASL. I didn't realize the history of the language by its creators, who were white. It wasn't until I entered Gallaudet and met my peers who were Black and Latino. That was my first experience. I grew up in a diverse community and incorporated language from many. I did feel it was appropriation. I was fascinated by it. However, it wasn't until I was there at Gallaudet that I started to learn a lot, seeing my vibrant language being used. And I was enamored. Growing up, I was always code switching. I needed to learn to communicate, express myself, use my voice. It wasn't until I was older that it really hit me. I didn't realize that it was language appropriation. I am disappointed, and it makes me angry because I wish I had known Black ASL within Canada. I wish I had the opportunity to interact with Black people before, but for most of my life, I didn't. Language appropriation is very difficult for me. I hope someday, starting now, that IBPOC Black deaf people can develop our sign language. We can learn from the Americans and Canadians, incorporating different aspects. That's my goal. This is emotional for me. I am 42 years old, and I feel I have missed out on so much. I have always had to be the one to code switch to white ASL when I was uncomfortable and not wanting that to be visible to others. and be further marginalized by them. But I smiled and did, even when it conflicted with how I was truly feeling. Thank you, Nancy and Sarah. It is time to wrap up. Thank you for sharing, being raw. Thank you for joining our program and sharing your perspectives. And again, for being so raw. We really appreciate it. This project was made possible through DNEXT Accessible Media Lab at the Center for Independent Living in Toronto. We would love to send a big thanks to the Ontario Trillium Foundation for providing funding. Thank you for making this happen. We hope you continue the fight in breaking down barriers. Yes, and bringing equality to our wonderful world. From Gatry and myself, Courage, thank you and goodbye. Thank you so much.